Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm checking out the Eachine QX95 from Banggood.com. Now I think whichever company has been making these has been very busy because we now have the QX95, the QX90 and the QX90, and essentially they all have the same components and just a different frame, except this time we have a couple of different features on the QX95, and that is what I am interested in. So the first thing that I notice with this one is the motors are different. So you can see that the propellers are fitting flush against the motor, and this was a problem that I had with the QX90. The shaft of the motor was too long, and these propellers aren't very good anyways, but the prop doesn't sit at the bottom of the motor and it vibrates, and it causes a lot of vibration on the camera, which isn't good for flying. The other thing that you will notice with the QX95 is this LED strip on the back. And I tell you, I've booted it up quickly and it is so bright. It also changes depending on the different functions that you set, and I will check that out in a bit. But essentially it's got the same components. We've got the same SP Racing F3 Evo flight controller. This is the FreeSky version, and it also comes in FlySky and DSM2, as do all of these now. And the frame, it is kind of like a hybrid of an X frame and a H frame. So the back ones stick out like an X frame and the front ones like a H frame, which I kind of like because you don't get the props in shot. Now, I really like the QX90. I like the form factor, but you do get the props in shot. And I imagine this is going to be lighter, but I'm going to check that out a bit later. So we've got one of these 25 milliwatt 5.8 gigahertz all-in-one cameras that is 32 channels, and looking at the previous ones, it is the same camera as the QX80. Now the QX90 does seem to have a slightly different camera, however the antenna is the same than the QX90, so it's kind of like a hybrid of the two. Now I think a lot of people preferred the clarity of the QX80 rather than the QX90, which is a good thing that it shares the same camera. However, I do think that the blur on the QX90 is caused by the vibrations of the props. So talking of the props do seem to be the same as the QX90's props, which are the Hubsan H107 AL props. And these didn't fare well at all, but I think that was partly down to the fact that they don't touch the bottom of the motor. So I'm going to fly this today with the stock propellers and see if it performs any better. Now, one thing that I did notice is that this came out of the box and the camera was all bent. And that is because it's only got this very thin band across it compared to these other ones. They've got the really thick black band and they don't move at all. In fact, this one is the most solid out of all of them. It does not move anywhere. But with this one, we've got a couple of foam pads and it gets knocked about quite easily. So in a crash, it's going to bend up. But I suppose that does make it easier to sort of tilt up and it sort of stays there. But I think I'll be swapping this band out because it's only weakness. It's good to have a steady camera because there's going to be some vibrations going through this frame and it will be shown through the camera. So we have the LED strip at the back and it's not secured on very well. So you can see there that it's come off already on this one just as I'm reviewing it. It's using these two sticky pads at the back. You can just sort of stick it back on, but I think I'm going to have to replace those. And a sort of bit of an oversight as well is the LED strip covers up the USB connector to the flight controller. Now that might not be a problem for a lot of people if you are just taking this out of the box and binding it to your transmitter. However, if you need to change certain settings, then you're going to need to remove this to plug it into the USB port. I guess it couldn't have been avoided with this flight controller as the USB port is at the back and there's not really anywhere else for this LED strip to go, but it's something to bear in mind. So let's see what else you get in the box. It comes in this box again, which is kind of like a hybrid of the two previous ones because it comes in a box. However, if you open it up, we've got that foam padding that we got with the QX90, so the quadcopter sits in there, and you can store it in there because the antenna sits on the top. It doesn't get bent, so that's pretty nice. So we have got the two batteries there. So these are the 600 milliamp one cell batteries that we got with the QX90 and the QX80, and we are given a bag of stuff. Let's take that out. So we've got two Velcro pads, and again they provide these to stick the batteries to the bottom of the quadcopter. However, this one does have a band around it, so you can put the battery on nicely there, because with the QX80 there was no easy way to put the battery underneath, and with the QX90 you had to sort of modify the band plate there to put the battery on underneath. So this one, just a simple band, making it easier to put the battery on, which is quite nice. So we've got a spare set of props. They seem to be sealed. We've got a carbon fiber prop remover. It does look different actually. It looks like it caters for the fact that there's no shaft available to get it in there, so yeah, that's just going to lift up, so slightly different one of those. And we've got this balance connector here, so this is for plugging two of these batteries in, and then you use one of those B3 chargers that charges direct from the balance port. But I use a Hobby Tiger charger, which is like a 6-port 1-cell charger for these micro Lossy batteries. Let's see what else we've got. So we have a charger. So this is a single charger, and you can just stick that into the Lossy connector there, and then that's going to charge from like your computer, I guess. And there's also another one of those tiny bands, so like a spare band for the camera. So that's everything that you get in the box. One thing that I did like about this package is this, which is the manual. It's a very good manual, which is something that's been lacking with the other two, which was usually just a sheet of paper. So it tells you all the channels there, shows you how to charge it, shows you how to bind to the Taranis, and then more options. So that's showing you need to put it into D8 mode. And then it's showing you what is set up in Cleanflight. So same as before, we only have angle mode and arming set up on a switch. So I'll be going in there and setting that up. And what's this telling you? Just more binding options. So this is binding for the Fly Sky version. So really extensive manual this time, which is cool. And also it shows you the LED sequence as well. So when it's disarmed, you've got two LEDs on the outside, orange and yellow in the middle, and then it changes when it's armed. Brake, so when the quadcopter, I guess, stops, it changes color. Throttle, looks like you're gonna have flashing lights for throttle, or it's gonna change the intensity of the light maybe. Roll left and roll right, so pretty cool functions on the LEDs there, and also shows you how to set them up as well. The only problem with the LED strip is that if you want to add Betaflight onto this, which I'm going to, then you're going to have to save the LED settings. So I'll show you how to do that. What I'll do is I will bind this to the transmitter, go into Cleanflight and show what settings I'd change there, and then flash Betaflight to it and copy the LED settings and stuff like that. So another benefit to this frame is that it is bigger, so 95 millimeters. And you may not know this if you are new to micros, but the propeller with the most amount of thrust is this one. It's called the Rolling Spider propeller, and that's because it was a quadcopter by Parrot, I believe, called the Rolling Spider. These have been cloned by GemFan, and you can buy them on Banggood as well, so I'll link those in the description. However, they are the most powerful prop for micros. You'll see everyone putting these on their micros. I did a thrust test of these quite a while back on the channel and they performed the best. So the question is, will it fit on this frame? Because I did a video where you can get them on the 90, but you have to bend the motors out, which isn't ideal. They won't go on the 80 at all because it's too small. Will they go on this one? So let's see. So I'm going to take off this propeller here with the provided tool, and I'm just going to sit this on there and see if it fits. It just about does fit. So that is good news. However, it is going to catch on this antenna. You'll probably want to move the antenna slightly out of the way. So that's good news. However, for this review, I'm just going to be using the stock propellers because I'm interested to see if there are any vibration issues with it. Now, I think something that people are going to want to know is how much does it weigh compared to these guys, because this one seems to have nice features, but it's pretty useless if it weighs too much and it's not going to fly very well. So let's get each one of these on the scales without a battery and see what the difference is. So first up is the QX95, and that is coming in at just 40 grams. That is really surprising. I thought it'd be heavier than that. So next is the QX90, and that is about the same, 39 to 40 grams. Of course, I've got those standoffs removed, so again about the same. And the QX80, 41 grams. It is the heaviest, surprisingly. So I'm going to set this one up on the Taranis, and I'm going to start with a completely fresh model and show you how to do that. So I'm going to turn on the Taranis. Now the first thing that I need to do is create a new model. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom of the menu. Look at that, 23 models, that is a lot. So I'm going to press enter and create new model. And I usually skip this part, so I just press exit out of there and just create one manually. So I'm going to page over and go into the model name there and then press enter, and I'm going to type in QX95. So I go over to Q and then I long press enter, and that turns the Q into a capital there. So I'm going to do the rest. Okay, now I'm going to change the model image. I usually go for the TBS discovery image. Just puts an image of the quadcopter on the screen instead of a plane, which a lot of these icons are. Of course, you can make your own custom icons. I'm not going to go into that on this video. So there is the TBS discovery. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to go to the bottom of the menu, make sure the external RF is switched off. And then I'm going to scroll up and change the mode to D8. And you just scroll down there and change it to D8. Okay, that is everything in that screen, I think. So next I'm scrolling over to the inputs because we're only given the throttle, aileron, elevator and rudder with a new model. Of course we need our mode switch and our arming switch, so I use this switch and this switch here for arming and my 3 modes. So I'm going to go onto channel 5 here and change the input name to mode, and this is going to be for the 3 different flight modes: angle, horizon and acro. Then if I scroll down to source here, I can select the switch that I want it to appear on. So I'm going to select that and press enter and then choose my switch, which is the 3 position switch at the top here, and it selects it automatically when you start moving it. So then I'm going to exit out of there and then tab over to the outputs, also known as the mixer, and it automatically selects mode there. Then I'm just going to change the mixer name to just a single letter. I usually just put M, but you can type mode if you like. I'm just doing this to save time. So then I'm going to page back by holding down the page button and then add input number 6. So this is going to be ARM, and again I'm going to scroll down and select the switch and then just move that to position switch at the back there and it changes to it. So I'm going to press enter and then exit, and then of course go over to the mixer tab and also link that up. So you've got an input and an output. So I'm just going to change this to A for ARM, and that is all of the modes set up. So next we need to bind the transmitter to the quadcopter, and to do that we need to scroll down to the bottom of the main menu and select bind, and then the Taranis should start chirping. Now, I've never found an easy way to do this next bit. You have to hold down the bind button on the receiver and then power it up, and this is really difficult, so I just sort of position the logic connector in place, hold down the bind button, and then just sort of push it in forward very quickly, and there we go, the light should go off. And the next time that I plug in the quadcopter and cancel out of that bind function in the Taranis, we should get a solid green light. And there we go, it is bound to the quadcopter. So I've turned the exposure down on the camera and you still can't see the colour of the lights because they're so bright. But it looks like here that we have got 2 green lights in the middle and 2 yellow ones on the outside. And then of course if you arm it, they go blue. And if you throttle up, the light changes from green to blue. And if you use aileron, so right aileron, 2 of the lights flash, and then left aileron, 2 of the lights flash. If you use rudder, then the lights flash. And then pitch, the lights flash as well. Ah, that's just brake, I guess, so it's just backwards. Nothing happens when you pitch forward. Pretty cool features though. Do not look at them too long with your eyes, you'll go blind, they're so bright. So here I am in Cleanflight. You download this via the Chrome app, and I have got the quadcopter plugged into the USB port of the computer via a USB mini lead, and I have removed that LED strip to gain access to the USB port on the quadcopter. So you can see at the top here it says COM5, and I'm going to connect to it. And everything should be set up correctly already. The only thing that we're interested in here is the modes. So you can see here that on auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 1 again, it is set to ARM and just have angle mode, and we need to change that. So first of all, I'm going to change ARM to auxiliary 2, and you can see there that that now moves into ARM, and this one doesn't move at all. So this one we want as angle mode. You can see when I change the switch, it moves, so we're in angle mode. Then horizon, so we want in that second range there, and lastly will be acro. So those are your 3 modes: angle, horizon, and acro. So you need to make sure that you save that, because if you don't, then nothing will save when you move between tabs. It's so easy to just move and then nothing's saved, so make sure that you press that. Another thing that I do personally, but this is just me, is I turn off motor stop. So I have the motors arm when you press the arm switch, so the props spin up. That means that you can have full access to the quadcopter on idle throttle. So when you're doing your flips, you can quickly throttle down and not have to worry to completely cut the throttle. Otherwise, the quad will fall out of the sky, so that is my preference. So what if you want to flash Betaflight? Now, it's my preference to do so because I think the quadcopter is easier to tune and flies better with it. However, we do have a problem, and that is the LED strip. See, they are pre-programmed, and when we flash Betaflight, it is going to erase this. All the other information doesn't really matter because we're going to set up from scratch. Anyway, but we are going to need to somehow copy the LED settings. So what you do is you go into CLI and then type in dump. And then what we want to do is find the LED settings. So they start here under LED and go all the way down to mode color and then copy those. And then get a text document up and paste them in there. And that's all we need, really. The other thing you might want to check is the serial RX. So it disconnects you when you come out of the CLI. So if we go into ports there, so the serial RX is on UR2. So I'm going to disconnect from this and close it down and keep the text document there and load up Betaflight. So it's showing us COM5 there. We're going to go into the firmware flasher and want to choose the board. Now it's the SP Racing F3 Evo that we want. So I'm going to choose version 3 because that's the latest stable version, and version 3 is really good. Going to do a full chip erase and keep the manual board rate at 256. Next, I'm going to load firmware online. And then scroll down, you see it says loaded there and flash firmware. Now you can see at the top there it said failed to open serial port, and that is because I have got various different drivers installed. So it's looking for a Mocal DFU, and I have a driver for my Devo 7E which conflicts. So what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description on how to troubleshoot Betaflight if you're having problems with the drivers. However, for me, I just need to go into my device manager here, and under USB where it says STM device in DFU mode. Actually, is it just installing it? Yeah, if I wait a minute, it might just install it because it is saying in DFU mode. Okay, that seems to be doing nothing. So I'm going to go into update driver and then browse my computer. Let me pick from a list. And then I'm going to choose STM32 bootloader and then close this one. Now if I disconnect the quadcopter from the computer and reconnect it, it should show as COM5 again. And now if I flash the firmware, DFU flashing, a driver confliction. So it says programming successful. So I can click connect now. And what we need to do is set everything up basically. So if you want to calibrate your accelerometer here, you can. However, it's looking like it's sitting pretty flat there, and the quad is on a flat surface, so it's going to be okay. Under ports there, it needs serial RX switching on the UART2, so it's a good job that we checked that, so you need to save and reboot to change that. Let's go into configuration, and we've got quad X and one shot 125. We definitely don't want that, so change it to brushed. Motor stop I'm keeping off. Minimum throttle about right at 1070. Maximum throttle about right at 2000. Receive mode, PPM incorrect, needs to be RX serial for S-bus. And is there anything else that we need to change? Yes, LED strip. So you'll see that we don't have an LED option in Betaflight. You need to select LED strip and then it all of a sudden appears. All looks good to me, so save and reboot. And then connect, and let's just check that it did save those settings. Brushed. If you don't change this to brushed, when you plug your battery in, the motor's going to spin up and you're going to cut yourself. So just make sure that is selected, or just take your props off. However, this is a micro, so it's not going to be the end of the world. Just disconnect it quickly if it does it, but you need to make sure that it's selected to brushed. Now, to change the LED settings, we need to go into CLI and then go into here and copy these settings there. So if I copy that, paste them in there and enter, it's going to update them, and then I'm going to type in save. It's very important. If you don't type in save, it won't change any of the settings. And then if we go into LED strip, as if by magic, the settings are there. So next, I need to set up my receiver actually. So I've got the Taranis switched on. So if I go into receiver, you can see it's doing all this crazy business. So something's gone wrong. First of all, we need to change the channel map to the spectrum, which is TAER. So if I just save that. I didn't select S-Bus, I think, in the settings. So if we go back to configuration and go down here, need to select S-Bus. If you ever get that crazy thing going, something's gone wrong with your receiver setup. So into receiver now, and the thing is looking nice. However, it's sort of a bit all over the place, so I am going to trim it. Basically what it does is 1500 is center, so if you can just change your trims to be sort of 1500 or as close to it as you can. That's about right. So modes, I need to key those back in. So arming, I'm having it on my arming switch, so auxiliary 2. Just move the slider over. Doesn't need to be neat. And then for angle mode, auxiliary 1, and put the slider there. Horizon for there, and acro for there, and that's all the modes set up. I don't use air mode, not with a micro either. I've not been having much luck with it. Tend to find that the quad bounces around quite a lot on the ground, and it's probably better to have air mode on a separate switch, but I've been flying without it recently. So save. So another thing that you need to do is disable these options here because they interfere with the LED strip. So I'm going to turn off telemetry and black box and transponder, and then save and reboot. Now sadly, the LED configuration does not transfer perfectly, and you will have to go and change a few things. The LED setup in Betaflight and Cleanflight is really clunky, which is why I suggested that you copy some of the settings. But when you connect this to Betaflight, the LEDs are going to be different colors. I guess the numbers don't tie up the same. So I'm going to show you what to do to make them similar to how they are in Cleanflight. However, if you really want them the same as in Cleanflight, then just stick with Cleanflight. But me personally, I prefer have a better flying quadcopter than have perfect LED setup. So when you plug the quadcopter into Betaflight, the LEDs will boot up, and 2 of your lights will now be purple instead of the yellow. So the way that it works is you've got 4 LEDs, and they are numbered from 0 to 3. So 0 is the one on the far left, and then 1 is the one next to that, going towards the right, 2, 3, etc. So you can see here that for LED 2, it is actually set to purple. So going off the manual, the LED in the disarm state should be yellow, so I'm going to change that. So just click that one there, and then same for number 1, and click that one there, and then when I press save, both of the LEDs go yellow on the quadcopter. So another thing that you need to change is the arm state, because that doesn't seem to work when you transfer it over to Betaflight. So the way that you do that, again, is just for these 2 lights. If you select this drop-down menu here, you have got arm state. And it is set up correct, but for some reason it doesn't work. And what I found you have to do is sort of click off it and then click back on it, and then save, and then when I select the arming function, it then works. I don't know why that is. And do the same for this one. Go down to arm state and select armed. You see that the right color is selected, but it is not the case on the LED for some reason. So again, if I press save, then that then works. Your disarmed is green and your armed is blue. Now, something that will be different is the directional lights. So when you put the aileron in, only one of the lights will flash instead of two of them. That doesn't bother me at all. It's working fine. The throttle will still change color. So when you throttle up, when the quad is armed, the two lights in the middle will go red, and that works fine. So yeah, you can't get the exact same LED setup. Actually, I'm sure you could if you worked at it, but I am not bothered that much to work out what the differences are. So if you really want to retain those LED sequences, then stick with Cleanflight. But if you're happy with just a bit of a compromise by changing a couple of the settings, then do what I have done in this tutorial, and you'll have a better flying quadcopter with working LEDs. So I will just talk about my PID settings quickly. Now these are the stock PIDs, and I'm just going to boost up the integral to 45 because that works nicely for me. Going to boost up the derivative to about 60. It's just a stock setting that I know works well with my other quadcopters. The RC rate I am going to change to 1. And I need to change the yaw because currently it's set as 0, so we won't have any yaw at all. They need to change the stock setting of that. All the way up to 1, and then the super rate I like to have at 0.8 for all of them. And then I'm going to decrease the RC expo to 0. And that is the PIDs that I use. Now you sometimes get a preview down here, but for some reason it's not showing on this version of Betaflight for this board. So sadly, I was checking out the FPV feed on the camera of this quadcopter, and it has what can only be described as tadpoles on the screen. I'm covering the lens up there, and I thought, great, another one of these cameras that's a dud. But then I thought, I've got a few of these cameras, so let's plug in my QX80, and lo and behold, it also has them. But not as bad. You can see it more when it's indoors and when you cover up the lens with your finger. So that is 4 of these cameras I've received, where 3 of them have got a defect. Look at that. Definitely there. I think some light is getting through to the lens or something. But then I plugged in my third QX80, and this didn't have it at all. So all of these quadcopters, the QX95, the QX80, they have the same camera, and out of 4 of them, only 1 of them has no defects. So that is definitely a downside for me. So this camera thing has put a bit of a downer on this review for me, which is a shame because this quadcopter has so much more power than the QX80 and the QX90. But you can still see that artifact on the screen. It's not as bad in the daytime, but they have definitely used different motors on this quadcopter because it has ample power. It's just this camera that has been a failure. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you get one of these, you will have the same. However, 3 out of 4 is not good odds for me. Now, usually when you are a reviewer, you do tend to get the duds, because you get like the early versions rather than the more polished versions, but I can't guarantee that you're not going to get one with a bad camera. As the flying goes, it flies great. We're getting a little bit of vibration on the image, and that is mostly down to the propellers and also down to that weak rubber band holding the camera in. Now, I did try and fit the thicker black rubber band to the camera, and there isn't a lot of space to do that, and it's really fiddly. You can do it, but it's really difficult to do, so I can see why they have actually included a smaller rubber band in this one. And the tune isn't great either. I mean, it's not bad at all. It definitely needs a little bit of work. I'm getting some slight wobbles on the pitch, but there is so much power with this one. I mean, it's got loads of punch. You could be confused for it being a brushless model. So I thought I would just fly it around and just give it some of the micro FPV track treatment, so flying through the trees, and I think this is the best flying one, I have to say. The only thing that you do get is more vibrations at the high end of the throttle. I think that's because these motors rev high. I'm going to do a little punch out here over the tree, and it has got some power, this one. Lots of power over the QX80 and QX90 for sure. So I guess it's got the upgraded motors, and the other ones just have Hubsan motors, even though they don't really document that in the description. So anyway, I really like how this one flies. I really like how it performs. I love the LEDs, but I just cannot give the camera any praise at all because I have had more defects on them. So the first QX80 I had that line across it, and then the second QX80 had this problem with these sort of tadpoles on the screen, even though I didn't really notice that one because I flew it only outside, and it's not as bad as this one. And then I plugged this one in and I could see it straight away. And I've had 2 QX90s and none of them have had a problem with the camera, so when it comes to the camera, I have to recommend the QX90. When it comes to performance, this one. And I guess if you want the ultimate setup, then you could get this one and then buy the QX90 camera. So I'm doing a little bit of a range test here, and the range of this is just brilliant. Hardly any breakup at all, and we are out to about 110, 120 meters at this point, and it just flies really nice. I'm able to fly all around the edge of this field, which is all I ever ask for. You can see that there's plenty of leaves around now. And it was also an extremely windy day, so I think that had something to do with the tune slightly, because yeah, it wasn't great, but I didn't really notice it getting blown around by the wind, but the tune did seem a little bit wobbly, so I will put it down to that, I think. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to stick on the rolling spider props, because with these Hubsan props, the performance is fantastic. With the rolling spider props, it should be pretty insane. So I'm going to go and pick my best set of rolling spider props, because those propellers do tend to have vibration problems themselves if you pick a particular set. So I'm just doing another once round of the field, and the flight time's really good, so it must be, what, a 6-minute flight time? I'm really impressed with everything regarding this quadcopter, again, apart from the camera. But there you go. What can you say? You know, this is how I have received it. So I'm going to come in for a landing and stick on the rolling spider props. So just as I suspected, this thing is absolutely insane with these props. I mean, look at this punch out. You would confuse it for being a brushless 3-cell model. So there you go, that is my review of the QX95, and I do believe if you got a version of this with a working camera, then you definitely have the best of these RTF micro models that have been released. But for me, I have this camera problem, so I'm probably going to stick with the QX90 and put some of these motors on it, because now I know that these are the more powerful motors, and I'll stick with that until I can get a version with a working camera. So I'll put a link in the description of all of these RTF micro quads if you wish to buy one. I'm going to leave you with some flight footage. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.